My wife kicked me out and took every last thing I owned just to hand it all over to her lover. The only thing I had left was an old debit card my father gave me. I was sure the balance was zero, but what it ended up doing made the bank manager tremble with fear. Tell me what city you're listening from, and don't forget to leave your like and subscribe so we can unravel this mystery together. The thick, heavy heat of a New York City summer slammed into Darren Coleman's skin the moment he stepped out of the Uber in front of the Sterling Tower, one of the most luxurious high-rises in Midtown Manhattan. He'd spent the last 2 weeks in a small, dusty town deep in the Appalachian foothills of Georgia, tending to his mother, who had been on the brink of death. Now that she was stable, Darren was finally heading home. He longed for the comfort of his luxury penthouse, and, most of all, to see his wife, Veronica. He dragged his suitcase across the gleaming marble lobby of the Sterling Tower, which was saturated with cold air and expensive perfume. A look of relief washed over his face when the elevator paused on the 30th floor with a soft chime. He was exhausted, his travel clothes wrinkled, and his mind was fried. But he was happy to be back. The hallway was cool and quiet, carpeted, and lit by low, ambient lights. He stopped in front of door 30, his penthouse. He reached into his backpack, pulled out the electronic key fob, and held the card up to the digital reader. Beep, beep. A red light flashed. Access denied. Darren frowned, tried again, and got the same harsh beep-beep. That's weird. Maybe it got demagnetized, he muttered, trying not to feel uneasy. He rang the doorbell twice. There were a few seconds of silence. Only the distant hum of the elevator could be heard. Then, footsteps from inside, the turn of the deadbolt, and the heavy door swung open. There stood Veronica, his wife. But it wasn't the Ronnie he knew. Her eyes were cold, calculating. She was wearing a silk robe, her hair was tousled, and the apartment air was thick with a masculine cologne that wasn't his. "Oh, you came back so soon," she said, without a trace of joy. Darren's heart stopped for a second. "Ronnie, why? Why doesn't my key work?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Because I changed the locks," she replied, still blocking the entrance with her body. From inside, a man's clear, brazen laugh could be heard. "Honey, who is it? If it's a salesman, tell him to beat it." A young voice called out. A handsome man, much younger than Darren, appeared behind Veronica. Darren recognized him immediately. It was Chad Hayes, an Instagram model, an influencer, who was starting to get famous and who Darren had always distrusted. Chad was wearing Darren's silk robe, the very one Darren had bought for himself for their wedding anniversary the year before. He looked Darren up and down, judging his travel jeans, his tired face, and his worn suitcase. "Oh," Chad said with a smug smile. "It's not a salesman. Turns out it's the ex-husband." "Ex-husband? Ronnie, what is this?" Darren whispered, feeling tears well up in his eyes. "Who is he? Why is he in our home? Why is he wearing my clothes?" Veronica sighed, as if he were an insignificant nuisance. "Look, Darren, this is over. No, we should talk downstairs. Don't start a scene up here," she said, not moving aside. She didn't even let him step inside. She walked out into the hall, closed the door behind her, and left Chad inside, smiling superiorly. They rode down in the elevator in silence. Veronica didn't say a single word. Darren was petrified, unable to process what had just happened. He could still smell Chad's aggressive cologne, a scent completely unlike his own, lingering in the air. The elevator opened into the crowded lobby. It was rush hour, and some residents were watching them with curiosity. Veronica walked quickly toward a corner of the vestibule, partially hidden next to a window that looked out onto Fifth Avenue. Darren followed her like a robot. "Ronnie, explain to me what's happening," Darren pleaded, his voice thin. "What is there to explain?" she replied, ice cold. "It's not clear." "No," he muttered. "We've been together for 10 years. "Yeah, and it's over. You and I are done." "That's it. After 10 years? After I cared for your mother when she had her stroke last year? After we built everything together from scratch?" Darren burst out, incredulous. Veronica let out a cynical chuckle. "Built everything with me from scratch? Don't be ridiculous, Darren. I'm successful because of my work. You've just been a burden, especially since you started spending all your time looking after your mom in that hick town. You forgot your duties. As a husband." "My duties?" "Yes. Look at you," she said, pointing at him with contempt. "Disheveled, careless. I'm a major real estate developer. I need a partner on my level, not a kept man running family errands." "And you and Chad, have you been together this whole time?" Darren asked, his jaw clenched. "Yes, we've been together for 1 year," Veronica answered without a trace of guilt. "And he actually understands me." Just then, a security guard approached, pushing a small, worn suitcase, a frayed travel bag that Darren instantly recognized. It was the same one he had used when they first moved to New York years ago. Veronica took the bag and tossed it at Darren's feet. Parts of the contents spilled out. Old clothes, a coin purse. "There are your things. I threw the rest out," she added. And then she also tossed a manila envelope onto the bag. "Those are the divorce papers. I already signed them. Inside is an agreement. All the assets. This penthouse, the cars, the company. Everything is in my name. You came into this marriage with nothing. You're leaving with nothing." The tears finally escaped Darren's eyes. This wasn't just a humiliation. It was a cold, calculated execution. You can't do this," he stammered. "Of course I can, and I already did," Veronica retorted, her eyes glacial. "Sign those papers. If you behave, and don't claim any marital assets, maybe I'll be generous, and give you cash for a bus ticket back to your little town in Georgia." A murmur spread through the lobby. People whispered as they watched the scene. Darren felt naked, exposed. "Get out," she spat. "But this is still my house." "Not anymore," Veronica shouted. "Security." 2 guards approached, looking uncomfortable, but clearly siding with the owner of the penthouse. "I'm sorry, sir. Please don't make a scene," one of them said, gently taking his arm. Darren was dragged toward the exit. He looked back pleadingly. "Ronnie, please!" But she only stared at him with an empty expression and then turned, walking toward the elevator. From the mezzanine railing, Darren could see Chad's silhouette watching his victory. The lobby's glass door closed with a sigh, separating him from the last 10 years of his life. He ended up on the hot sidewalk under a darkening sky, with only a bag of old clothes and insulting divorce papers. Night fell quickly over the city. The streetlights flickered on like electric fireflies, but for Darren, everything was still shrouded in darkness. He walked aimlessly, the sound of car horns and heavy traffic roaring in his ears. He had nowhere to go. His mother was still recovering in Georgia. He couldn't burden her with this disaster, too. His steps led him to a bench in Central Park. He sat, looking at the skyline of illuminated buildings. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since morning. Around him, restaurant terraces were filling up. The smell of steak, barbecue, and ice cream wafted through the air, intensifying his hunger. People laughed. Couples walked hand in hand. Darren felt like an invisible, non-existent ghost. He opened the coin purse Veronica had thrown at him. Inside were about $10 in bills, not even enough for a night in a cheap motel on the outskirts. He pulled out his cell phone. The battery was at 5%. He quickly opened the bank app for their joint account. Balance, 0. Veronica hadn't just thrown him out. She had bled him dry, emptying every last dollar from the common account, including the savings he had before they got married. A cold, heavy desperation coiled in his chest. It's over, he thought. He had hit rock bottom. He was going to sleep on the street tonight. Tears began to fall silently. He looked inside the coin purse again. Behind the card compartments was a faded photo, an image of his father. His father, Albert Coleman, a humble farmer and produce broker, had died 10 years earlier, just before Darren married Veronica. Behind the photo was something else. With trembling fingers, Darren pulled on an edge and slid out a washed-out blue debit card with peeled edges. The logo was barely readable. First Heritage Bank of the South, a small, local regional bank. Darren froze for a few seconds. He remembered. His father had given him that card when he was 17, just before he moved to New York City to go to college. "Hold on to this, son," he'd said then, in that soft but firm voice. "It's an account your old man opened for you. Never use it unless you absolutely have to. Don't mix it with your spending money. Pretend it doesn't exist." "How much is in it, Dad?" he'd asked, curious. Albert had just smiled cryptically. "Enough to set an anchor. If you ever feel like your boat is sinking, use this. But, as long as you can sail, don't touch the anchor." Darren never used it. He'd forgotten all about it. College, friends, then Veronica, and building his wife's empire had taken up all his mental space. He had always assumed the account contained, at most, a few $100s left over from some old allowance. But tonight, his boat wasn't about to sink. It had already been blown to pieces. He squeezed the card tightly. The $10 in cash wouldn't get him anywhere. But maybe, just maybe, the money his father had left him would cover a bus ticket back to Georgia. A small, thin thread of hope began to ignite in his tight chest. He didn't sleep. He took refuge under the awning of a closed store, hugging his bag like a life raft and waiting for dawn. He was dirty, hungry, and terrified, but the faded card felt warm in his hand. By 8 o'clock in the morning, he was standing in front of a branch of the First Heritage Bank of the South on a side street in the older downtown area. The building was exactly as he remembered it from childhood visits, an old stone structure anchored in the past, so different from the modern glass and steel banks where Veronica kept her money. Inside, the atmosphere was quiet. There were only 2 tellers and a customer service desk. The smell of old paper and dust dominated the air. Darren took a number. He was the only customer. He was called to the desk, manned by a young man in a white shirt. His name tag read, Ethan. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" he asked kindly, though his eyes showed a slight confusion at Darren's somewhat disheveled appearance. "Good morning," Darren replied, his voice hoarse. "I want to check the balance, but the card is very old, and I forgot my PIN." He handed over the worn blue card. Ethan took it, turned it over in his fingers, and frowned. "Wow, sir, this card is ancient." "It's our old logo," he commented. "Can it still be used?" Darren asked anxiously. "I'll check, sir. May I see your ID?" The young man took his license and confirmed the name. Darren Coleman. Then he started typing on the computer. The system seemed slow. Ethan typed, clicked, typed again, and frowned. "That's strange," he muttered. Darren's heart raced. "Is something wrong?" he asked, terrified. The information isn't popping up immediately. Our old system can be temperamental sometimes. It looks like this account is in an inactive or dormant state. How long has it been without movement? Maybe 20 years, he replied, hesitant. Ethan's eyes widened. 20 years? One moment, sir. I'm going to try logging into the manual server. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Green code lines that Darren didn't understand appeared on the screen. The silence became thick. All that could be heard was the tap of the keys and the hum of the air conditioning. Darren bit his lip, convinced the account would be closed and the money lost. Ethan scratched his head. That's weird. The balance isn't showing up, sir, but there's a sort of flag, a high-level alert on this account. An alert? Darren asked, a lump in his throat. Does that mean I owe money? No, not a debt, he replied, nervous. I've never seen this code. One moment, please. He typed another series of commands. The computer seemed to think about it, and then something appeared on the screen. Ethan's relaxed face changed in an instant. He turned paper white, his eyes glued to the monitor. Mr. Ethan! Darren called out. Worried, he didn't answer. He was frozen, rereading what he saw over and over. His mouth opened slightly, he swallowed hard, and then suddenly stood up, so fast that his chair shot backward with a loud screech. Mr. Sterling, sir. Director, he shouted, shattering the bank's silence. You have to see this. He was no longer looking at Darren. His eyes remained fixed on the screen, as if there were something there that frightened him. From a glass-walled office, a middle-aged man with a severe face, Mr. Sterling, the branch manager, emerged. What is it, Ethan? Don't yell like that. We have customers, he scolded in a dry tone. Sorry, sir, but you have to see this, Ethan insisted, pointing a trembling hand at the screen. Account in the name of Darren Coleman. Inheritance from his father, Albert Coleman. Mr. Sterling sighed, annoyed by the interruption, and approached the desk, ready to reprimand his employee. He glanced at the screen and froze. His rigid, professional expression instantly crumbled. It went from annoyance to confusion, and then to deadly paleness. He looked at the monitor, then at Darren, then back at the monitor. Mr. Darren Coleman? He asked, his voice now shaking. Yes, Darren replied, frightened. What's going on? Was my father a criminal? Ethan, close your window now. Put up the closed sign and take the gentleman to my office. And don't let anyone else see that screen, Mr. Sterling ordered urgently. The tone was so pressing that Darren jumped. Ethan, stammering, rushed to hang the sign and turned off the monitor. This way, sir, he said, suddenly treating him with almost reverent respect. In the small manager's office, the door was immediately locked. Mr. Sterling paced back and forth for a few seconds before finally sitting down in front of his computer. His hands trembled slightly as he turned it on. Please excuse us, sir. This has caught us by surprise, he said, trying to regain his composure. I honestly don't understand anything, Darren replied, on the verge of tears. Did my father leave a huge debt? Debt? Mr. Sterling let out a nervous chuckle. No, sir, quite the opposite. He turned the monitor toward Darren. Ethan, standing in a corner, pointed to the screen, barely breathing. Look at this, please. The screen didn't show a simple dollar balance, but a diagram of an ownership structure. This isn't a normal savings account, sir, Mr. Sterling explained, his voice low and astonished. It's a master account linked to a limited liability company. A company? An LLC? Darren repeated, frowning. Exactly. Coleman Legacy, LLC, Mr. Sterling read. Your father, Albert Coleman, founded it in 1998, and it was dormant for 20 years. But my father was just a produce broker. Darren whispered. That's what he wanted people to believe, Mr. Sterling interrupted. From what I see here, he wasn't just selling produce. He was a land broker and a genius, if I may say so. He clicked another tab on the screen. Assets list, Coleman Legacy, LLC. This company legally owns 2,000 acres of pecan groves and farmland in rural Georgia. It's all under this deed, and full ownership was transferred to you as the heir with a special clause. What clause? Darren whispered. That the company is activated, and all its assets become accessible to the heir only if the heir accesses the master account in a desperate situation, or if the balance of their personal accounts is zero, Mr. Sterling read. Darren's jaw went slack. His father had foreseen it. He looked at the row of data on the screen. They weren't savings figures, but land areas, shares, and assets. He didn't faint or scream. He straightened up in the chair. The hunger, the exhaustion, and the humiliation of the last 24 hours dissipated, replaced by something cold, sharp, and very strong. He remembered Veronica's mocking gesture, Chad's triumphant smile. Mr. Sterling, Darren said with a calm that surprised even himself. Yes, sir. What do I have to do to activate this company right now? Mr. Sterling looked at him with concern. It wasn't the reaction he expected. In front of him was not a man crying with joy or relief, but someone whose eyes, still swollen from crying, had hardened. He observed the screen with a cold, terrifying concentration. Mr. Sterling, he repeated without hesitation. What do I need to activate this? Technically, it's already active, sir, he stammered. As soon as you accessed the account with a zero personal balance, the clause was met. Our legal team, which manages the trust, is already awaiting your instructions. Ethan quickly placed a glass of water in front of Darren, who didn't even touch it. My father, Albert Coleman. What else do you know about him? Darren asked. Mr. Sterling opened a drawer and pulled out a thick, dusty folder. Your father was a priority client long before the concept of private banking existed, he explained. He left this, a letter and several legal documents. He asked us only to give them to his son, or to open them if his son ever accessed the account. He handed him a yellowed envelope. Darren's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a handwritten note in his father's firm script. To my son, Darren, if you're reading this, two things may have happened. First, your old man is no longer here, and you're ready to start your own life. Second, life didn't turn out the way you expected. Darren swallowed and kept reading. Your dad was a broker. It's true. But I also know that this world isn't always fair to decent black men like you. I saw how they treated your mother. And I know what some people are capable of when they see someone vulnerable. Your dad saved a little anchor for you, not to spoil you, but to make sure you have options when you're cornered. I designed the desperation clause on purpose. I know you're smart, but I also know you have a big heart. I was afraid. If you had money, you might attract the wrong woman. And if you didn't have money, the wrong woman might trample you anyway. I wish you never had to read this letter. But if you are reading it, remember your dad's message. Don't cry. Don't come back with tears. Build your own kingdom, son. Make them regret it. The anchor is already cast. Now sail with love, Dad. The tears he had been holding back finally fell. But they were not tears of sadness. They were of understanding. His father, that simple broker, had seen the future. He had seen Veronica decades before she had appeared in Darren's life. Darren wiped the tears with the back of his hand and looked at Mr. Sterling. I need 3 things, he said. What are they, sir? First, cash. I don't have a single dollar, he answered bluntly. Of course, Ethan, prepare a withdrawal from the operational account immediately, Mr. Sterling ordered. Second, Darren continued, I need a place to stay for a few days. A secure hotel, far from the Sterling Tower. That can be arranged. We have corporate agreements with secure hotels, the manager nodded. And third, and this is the most important thing, Darren leaned forward. I need all the financial information for Coleman Legacy, LLC, and a recommendation for the best corporate restructuring consultant you have, but someone who is not in Veronica's circle. I want someone from the financial district, someone who doesn't know her. Mr. Sterling was momentarily speechless, impressed by the serenity of this man who, half an hour earlier, had looked like a homeless person. I know someone, he said. He's called the Cleaner. Very expensive, very cold. His name is Derek. Perfect, Darren replied. Get me the cash, make the hotel reservation, and arrange a meeting with Derek. Darren didn't stay at the hotel Mr. Sterling had reserved for him. That was his first move, not to be predictable. After withdrawing a considerable amount of cash that would have made him dizzy the day before, he bought a new mobile phone with a new number and several changes of simple but clean clothing at a nearby mall. Then he booked a room at the St. Regis on Fifth Avenue, one of the most luxurious hotels in the city, using a false name. He locked himself in for 24 hours. He ordered room service, ate as he hadn't in days, took a hot bath, and slept. He allowed his mind to process the destruction and the rebirth that had occurred in a single day. The next morning, he didn't call Derek. He knew that someone like him wouldn't be impressed by a phone call. Darren showed up directly in the heart of the financial district, surrounded by glass skyscrapers. Derek's office was on a high floor, minimalist, cold, all glass and steel. With his new, simple, and neat clothes, Darren stood out in that environment, but he didn't feel inferior. I want to see Mr. Derek, he told the receptionist. I don't have an appointment. Mr. Derek is busy, sir. His schedule is full for the next 2 months, the woman replied without looking up much. Tell him, Darren insisted calmly, that I'm Darren Coleman, owner of Coleman Legacy, LLC, with 2,000 acres of assets. The receptionist hesitated, but the words 2,000 acres and the conviction in Darren's voice made her pick up the phone. 5 minutes later, she escorted Darren to a corner office with a panoramic view of the entire city. Derek Chambers was a black man in his late 30s, tieless, but more formal than many directors in suits. He didn't smile. His eyes were sharp, and he analyzed Darren from head to toe. I only have 10 minutes, Mr. Coleman, he said, in a low, flat voice. Coleman Legacy, a dormant company, agricultural assets. What's the problem? Darren sat down without waiting for an invitation. The problem, Mr. Chambers, he said, is that this company just woke up. The assets are huge, but I don't know anything about pecans or peaches or how to manage all of this. And I have another problem that needs solving, which is my ex-wife, a developer in this city named Veronica. She's demanding a piece of the pie. She knows nothing about this. Derek raised an eyebrow. Interesting. What do you want from me? I want you to restructure this company from the ground up, audit it, turn it into a modern, active, and profitable company. And I want you to be my personal advisor, Darren said without hesitation. I want to learn how to wield this power. Derek watched him for a long time. I'm expensive, sir, he warned. I know, Darren replied. I'm not interested in having you manage my personal drama. I'm asking you to teach me how to win a business war. The drama is the bonus. Derek offered a slight smile. The first one. When do we start? He asked. Yesterday, Darren replied. 2 weeks passed. The city had no idea what was happening in those discreet offices. Darren and Derek's small team worked 20 hours a day, dissecting Coleman Legacy, LLC. They discovered that the assets were greater than anticipated. Albert Coleman had not only bought land, he had also acquired small stakes in food and agricultural companies that were now worth a fortune. Darren learned quickly. He devoured financial reports, studied agricultural law, and absorbed the basics of agribusiness management. Derek watched him, intrigued. This client was different. He wasn't driven by panic or greed, only by focus. He was like a dry sponge absorbing everything. In those 2 weeks, Darren also transformed externally. He cut his long, messy hair into a short, sharp, elegant cut. He threw out his old clothes with the help of a personal shopper Derek hired. His wardrobe now held customs-made suits, fine cotton shirts, and simple, elegant clothes in sober colors: black, navy, gray. The dark circles under his eyes gave way to a sharp, awake look. Worn sneakers were swapped for dress shoes. But the biggest change was in his eyes. There was no more fear, only calculation. "Are you ready to get back in the ring, sir?" Derek asked one afternoon. "I'm more than ready," Darren replied. He didn't return to the hotel. On his orders, Derek's team had worked in silence within the city. They bought an old mansion in a historic district of Atlanta. It wasn't a new, ostentatious mansion like the ones Veronica loved, but a historic, solid, elegant house with an air of old money and generational power. They paid for it in cash. When Darren crossed the threshold of his new mansion, he was no longer the man who had been kicked out of the Sterling Tower lobby. He was Mr. Darren Coleman, CEO of Coleman Legacy, LLC. Meanwhile, in the penthouse at the Sterling Tower, Veronica and Chad's life was at its peak. "This project, baby," she exclaimed one night, pouring champagne into a glass that Chad was holding for a selfie. "This is going to be a game changer." After sweeping Darren out of her life, Veronica felt invincible. Her construction company, Sterling Development, was frantically looking for projects. "I have inside information," she said, her eyes shining with ambition. "There's incredible land, thousands of acres. That's about to hit the market. They say they're going to open it up for a luxury development. I have to get that contract." Chad, busy with his phone, barely listened. "Uh-huh. Cool. That means our wedding can be in Cancun, right? And I want that new, super expensive watch." "Of course, whatever you want," Veronica replied, though she was internally uneasy. To land such a large project, she needed a massive capital injection. She needed investors. Her company had considerable debts, the result of supporting an extravagant lifestyle. "I'm going to organize meetings with all the potential investors," she muttered. Days later, she began hearing rumors in Midtown business circles. "Did you hear?" a colleague commented. "There's a new player in town investing like crazy. He bought a mansion in Atlanta's historic district in cash, and he hired a consultant from the financial district, that Derek Chambers, the cleaner." "What's the company's name?" Veronica asked, interested. "Nobody knows for sure. They're very discreet. The only thing known is the company name, a really old one. Coleman Legacy, LLC. Does that sound familiar?" Veronica shook her head. "Antiquated name. They must be old money folks who are just now waking up their assets," she said, mentally licking her lips. It was the perfect opportunity. She ordered her assistant to find a way to contact Coleman Legacy. She had to present her proposal to develop the project in rural Georgia. She didn't know that the lands she coveted were the very ones Darren had inherited. The invitation arrived. Coleman Legacy was interested in hearing the proposal from Sterling Development, LLC. The meeting would take place at the CEO's residence in the Atlanta mansion. Veronica felt on top of the world. "Look, Chad, they invited me," she bragged. "They must have heard about my reputation." That morning, she put on her most expensive suit, rehearsed her presentation in front of the mirror, and left, determined to dazzle that mysterious investor. The tall wrought iron gate slowly opened when her car arrived. She entered a majestic but sober foyer with marble walls and antique furniture. A formal-looking assistant greeted her. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Sterling. Please wait in the boardroom. Our principal will arrive in a few minutes." She was led to an enormous library converted into a meeting room. On one side was a long mahogany table. On the other, tall windows overlooked an impeccable garden. In the background, a man was reviewing a laptop. Veronica thought he was the boss. "Good afternoon, sir," she greeted him. "I'm Derek Chambers, the consultant," he replied, looking up coolly. "Have a seat, Mrs. Sterling. Our principal is about to arrive." Veronica started to feel a little nervous. The atmosphere was too heavy, too quiet. 5 minutes felt like an hour. Suddenly, the double doors behind her opened. She didn't turn around immediately. She heard footsteps, polished dress shoes, firm, resonating on the marble floor. "Apologies for the wait," said a voice. A familiar voice, but impossible. Veronica froze. She knew that voice, though now it sounded cold and full of authority. She slowly turned her chair. The steps stopped at the other end of the table. There stood Darren. His hair was perfectly styled. His navy suit fitted his body with elegance. His features were serene, and his eyes belonged not to a wounded man, but to someone who gave orders. He looked at her without hate or love, just with the gaze of a superior addressing a subordinate. Veronica's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Darren sat calmly at the head of the table. Derek stood beside him and handed him a tablet. Darren looked at Veronica and offered a tiny smile. The smile didn't reach his eyes. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Sterling," he said in a clear voice that filled the room. "I am Darren Coleman, CEO of Coleman Legacy, LLC." He leaned forward slightly. "You may begin your presentation. I'm told you're very interested in the farmland in rural Georgia." He paused to let the sentence sink in. "Coincidentally, all that land you're so eager for is my property." The silence became dense. Veronica could hear her own heart beating. She thought it was a cruel joke, but Darren's eyes, which once looked at her with devotion, were now as cold as the marble beneath her feet. Darren," she managed to articulate. This is impossible. 2,000 acres, Coleman Legacy? Where did you get the money?" He leaned back in his chair without bothering to answer. "Mr. Chambers, what do you think of Sterling Development's initial proposal?" Derek, who had been a silent shadow until then, spoke in a flat, lethal voice. "Conceptually ambitious, but financially very weak. Mrs. Sterling, your proposal doesn't include an adequate risk analysis, and your profit projections are excessively optimistic." Veronica felt as if a bucket of ice water had been thrown on her. She had come to impress a naive investor. Instead, she was being audited. "Wait," she said, trying to recompose herself. Her arrogance searched for an explanation. Darren is just a facade, she thought. Derek is the one in charge. "Darren," she spoke with the condescending tone she had always used with him. "I don't know what happened to you, but this is a big business. Maybe we can collaborate. You know me. I'm the best developer in the city." Darren smiled faintly. "Oh, I know you very well, Veronica." He stood up and added, "I don't have much time, but I'll give you an opportunity." Hope lit up in her eyes. My team, he said, looking at Derek, will perform a full due diligence on your company, a thorough review of your financial life. We need to see your accounting, your list of assets, your list of debts. We will not invest a single dollar in a company that isn't transparent. Veronica hesitated. Opening her books would be a disaster. Her company was nowhere near as healthy as she claimed. Why does it have to be so complicated? She protested. It's me, Darren. Your ex-wife. Precisely because of that, Mrs. Sterling, Derek intervened. We must be professional. Take it or leave it. If you reject the audit, we will void your proposal and offer our land to another developer. I understand your competition in Midtown is very interested. It was a clear threat. Veronica was cornered. If she backed out, she lost the biggest project of her life. If she accepted, she would have to expose all her wounds. Fine, she said, finally forced. Let's do the audit. I have nothing to hide. Darren nodded. Mr. Chambers' team will be in touch with you. Good afternoon. Veronica was escorted to the exit. She got into her car with trembling hands. She didn't know if she had just dodged a bullet or walked straight into a trap, but she did know one thing. The new Darren scared her. She returned to the penthouse, a bundle of nerves. Honey? Chad greeted her, jumping off the couch in a new designer outfit. How do I look? Divine. How did it go? Are we rich yet? When are we starting to plan the wedding in Cancun? Shut up for a second. I'm thinking, Veronica yelled, throwing her jacket on the floor. He froze. Hey, why are you talking to me like that? Veronica paced back and forth. The investor is complicated. This is very bad. What do you mean, complicated? Did they say no? Chad asked, worried. No, not yet. But you won't believe it. She pulled at her hair. The investor, the CEO, is Darren. Chad froze. What? Darren? The one we kicked out? The one you called the little pauper, she snarled. He's no pauper anymore. He's a different person. He has a mansion in Atlanta, a financial district consultant, and he owns the land. Chad's handsome face turned pale. It was the worst-case scenario, not because he loved Veronica, but because his status, his luxuries, and his future depended on her wallet. And that wallet was now threatened by the man he had most despised. It's probably a bluff, Chad shrieked. He can't be that smart. He must have hooked up with some rich old lady. That's it. He's a kept man. Veronica barely heard him. He wants to audit my company. What am I going to do? Chad's desperation turned into rage. That guy, who does he think he is, coming back to ruin everything? I'll handle him. Chad blustered. Handle what? Don't get involved. But he already had a plan. He knew where the city's new elite met. He would find Darren and try to humiliate him in public, reminding him who he really was. A few days later, Chad found out from a friend that Darren often worked at a luxury boutique coffee shop in a new office area in Midtown. Chad arrived fully prepared, the latest designer clothes, an ostentatious watch, sunglasses indoors. He saw Darren sitting in a corner, alone, reading documents on a tablet while drinking coffee. Chad walked straight over and slammed his hand on the table to make noise. Well, look who's here, he said loudly, so everyone could hear. Mr. Darren Coleman, climbing fast, aren't we? From being kicked out of the lobby to sitting in a fancy cafe. Darren slowly looked up, stared at him for a second, and went back to his tablet without saying a word. That indifference irritated Chad even more. Hey, I'm talking to you, idiot. Don't play deaf. Who do you think you are, huh? You're messing with Veronica,
Stay away from her. She's mine now. Darren sighed and put the tablet aside and replied calmly, Yours? Things that are owned are usually objects. You, Mr. Hayes, are not a human being. Don't lecture me. I know why you came back. You came back to take her from me because she's successful now, right? Darren let out a cold chuckle. Take Veronica? Why would I bother picking up the trash I already threw out? Chad's face turned red. Darren stood up. They were now face to face. Listen closely, Darren whispered, with such intensity that Chad took a step back. I'm not interested in Veronica. I'm interested in her company. And just in case you're dying to know, he looked at the shopping bags Chad was holding. Veronica came begging me to finance her project. She's not even capable of paying for your lifestyle without pleading with me. Liar! Of course, Darren said. He took a black metal card out of his wallet. I'm feeling generous today. He called the waiter over. The check, please, and this gentleman's too. My treat. He looked at Chad. Consider it charity. You need it more than I do. He took his tablet and walked away, leaving Chad rooted to the spot. A spectacle for the entire cafe. The hook was set. While Veronica was urgently forced to hand over all her documentation to Derek's auditors, Chad was being ridiculed in front of strangers. That same night, Derek's team met in the war room of the Atlanta mansion. Veronica's cash flow statements were projected onto a huge screen. This isn't a company, Mr. Coleman, Derek said, pointing to the charts. It's a house of cards held together by thin air. Explain, Darren requested. First, materials, Derek began. She charges her clients for grade A cement, but the records show she buys grade C cement. She keeps 40% profit just from this embezzlement. It's illegal and dangerous. Darren recalled a small bridge Veronica used to brag about with a shudder. Second, debts. She doesn't have bank loans. She's too smart for that. She prefers to get into debt with small suppliers, sand yards, local hardware stores, small machinery lessors. She delays payments for months, even years, knowing they don't have the legal muscle to fight her. A list of names appeared on the screen. Garrison Supply and the Hardware Hub, Iberia Equipment, and many more. Darren recognized some. And third, taxes, Derek finished. She keeps 2 sets of books, one for herself and one for the IRS. Her tax evasion is massive. Darren remained silent. The woman he had been married to for 10 years, whom he had stood by through sickness and success, turned out to be a swindler, an extortionist, and a thief. Perfect, he finally said. Derek looked at him, surprised. Perfect? Yes. This gives us a weapon. What's the next step? Veronica is obsessed only with us, with the 2,000 acres, Derek explained. She hasn't realized that her debt to the small suppliers is her weakest point. I want you to... He stopped, adjusting the strategy. I want you to buy those debts. Derek smiled. I figured as much. I've already prepared 3 shell corporations in Delaware. We're going to buy every outstanding invoice from those suppliers. We'll pay in cash. The suppliers will be thrilled, Darren said. Thrilled? Derek nodded. And Veronica won't know a thing. She'll only feel relief because they'll stop calling her to collect. She'll think we're doing her a favor, and that we'll give her capital later. How long? Darren asked. Give me 1 week. In 1 week, Sterling Development, LLC, will no longer owe those small businesses anything. He paused. She'll owe us. And so it was. Just as Derek predicted, Veronica's life seemed to get easier overnight. The calls from furious suppliers stopped. She took it as a sign of good luck. She thought the rumor of her future collaboration with Coleman Legacy had scared off the collectors. She was completely wrong. Feeling less pressured, Veronica decided to take the final step. Secure Darren, not only as a business partner, but also back into her emotional network.
In her head, the old Darren was still weak, naive, and in love. She sent an enormous bouquet of white roses, his favorites from back then, to the Atlanta mansion, along with a note. I know I made a mistake. Let's talk like before. Dinner at our old spot. Darren was about to throw the flowers in the trash, but Derek stopped him. Go, he told him. Let her sink herself. That night, Darren went to the elegant restaurant where Veronica had proposed to him years earlier. She was already waiting for him, impeccable, with the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu. Darren, she said, taking his hand across the table. He let her hold it. His skin was cold. I'm so sorry. Darren looked at her in silence. I know I was terrible, she continued, her eyes moist. Her performance was perfect. Chad is just a toy. I let the pressure get to me. Business is tough, and you were so busy with your mom that I felt alone. And was it my fault? He interrupted her, his voice quiet. Was it my fault that you cheated on me? No, it wasn't my fault. She quickly corrected herself. I was blind. I didn't see the diamond I had until I saw you in the boardroom the other day. I realized. Realized what? He asked. How fantastic you are. We can be the best team. I broke up with Chad. He's not in the apartment anymore. She lied. Chad was actually out shopping with her credit card at that moment. We can start over. You with your land, me with my experience. Forget Derek. You don't need him. You only need me. Darren slowly pulled his hand away. Your seduction is better than your business presentation, he commented, ice cold. Veronica was disconcerted. Maybe you're right, he continued, as if thinking out loud. We need to fix this, yes, but I can't mix the personal with the professional. Sure, she rushed. Let's finish the company matter first. I've already seen the result of your audit, Darren said. And she asked anxiously. And we need to talk seriously, he replied. Tomorrow in my office at 10 a.m. Bring your lawyer if you want. Once that's resolved, we'll talk about us. He stood up, leaving her with the expensive bottle of wine and a confident smile, believing she had just won. At exactly 10 o'clock the next day, Veronica arrived at the mansion's boardroom without a lawyer and with another bouquet of roses. She was convinced the meeting was a formality before a reconciliation. The atmosphere, however, was anything but romantic. Darren was already seated at the head of the table. Derek stood by his side. On the mahogany table, there was no coffee or wine glasses, only stacks of legal documents. Sit down, Veronica, Darren said curtly. She obeyed, losing some of her smile. Let's get straight to the point, he announced. Mr. Chambers. The consultant placed a thick folder in front of her. Mrs. Sterling. This is the debt list for Sterling Development, LLC. He started with Garrison Supply, $100,000. The Hardware Hub, $50,000. Iberia Equipment, $200,000, and so on. The total verified debt, with 12 suppliers, amounts to $500,000. Veronica's face went pale. What does this mean? I'm negotiating with them. There's nothing left to negotiate, Darren interrupted her, because they've all been paid. She looked at him, confused. Paid? Who paid them? He pointed to himself. I did. Derek pushed a second folder forward. Through 3 investment firms affiliated with Coleman Legacy, LLC, we have acquired all of those outstanding invoices. The credit assignments are in this folder. Veronica opened the first page and felt her heart stop. In other words, Veronica, Darren said, leaning in to look her in the eyes, your company no longer owes those small businesses anything. A heavy silence ensued. Your company owes me. Me? Veronica stopped breathing for a moment. I can pay, she stammered. I can pay in installments. Of course you can. Darren replied. But I'm not interested in doing business with you, nor am I interested in getting back together. All I want is my money. He gently tapped the pile of papers in front of her. According to the assignment clause, this debt is overdue. From this moment on, you have 24 hours to liquidate that $500,000 in cash. 24 hours? That's impossible. Nobody has that much cash, she screamed, panicking. I do, he replied, ice cold. You set a trap for me. A trap? Darren stood up. I'm only claiming what's mine, just like you kept everything that was mine before. If you don't pay within 24 hours, he dropped a third folder onto the table. Our legal team will immediately register a lien on the penthouse at the Sterling Tower, on your office, and on all your heavy machinery. Good afternoon, Mrs. Sterling. 24 hours. Veronica had never felt a day so short. Upon leaving the mansion, she didn't return to the apartment. She was beside herself. She spent the first hour driving aimlessly, cursing Darren, Derek, and the world. The second hour, she called her bank manager. I need a loan of $500,000. I'll put my Georgia project up as collateral. The manager laughed on the phone. Veronica, don't joke. You don't have that project yet, and your line of credit is already maxed out financing. Well, you know. Veronica slammed the phone down. From the 3rd to the 10th hour, she dedicated herself to calling all her contacts, every friend she had toasted expensive wine with, every official whose hand she had greased. The responses were variations of the same rejection. Ugh, that sounds complicated, Veronica. Or, geez, I'm out of the country. Or they simply didn't answer. The news of her possible downfall, which had begun to spread since the meeting at the mansion, was running faster than fire. In the 11th hour, desperate, she returned to the penthouse. Chad was trying on a new outfit. How do I look? Divine. No, sell it, she roared. What? Sell everything, she bellowed, her eyes bloodshot. Sell your watches, your expensive sneakers. We're bankrupt. His face crumbled. Those are gifts, not investments. Are you crazy? Darren set a trap for me, Veronica raved. That jerk bought my debts. He gave us 24 hours to pay $500,000. Chad didn't care about the debt structure. He only heard one thing. The money was gone. This is all your fault, he screamed, hitting her chest. You said you were rich, that you were a big deal, and you turn out to be a fake. Veronica, who had already lost everything, unleashed her rage on the only available target. My fault? The fault is mine? Who asked for expensive watches every week? Who demanded vacations in Cancun? You made me spend. Parasite! Parasite! Chad gasped. The argument was so brutal and loud that it became a spectacle at the entrance of the Sterling Tower. They didn't realize that across the street, someone was recording them with their phone. I didn't sign up for this, Chad yelled. It's over. He dragged his suitcase, trying to hail a cab. Where are you going? You won't survive without me, Veronica scoffed. You'll see. Chad went straight to a luxury hotel and tried to book a room with the unlimited card she had given him. I'm sorry, sir. Card declined, the receptionist said, unperturbed. He tried another. Declined. All declined. Veronica had blocked the accounts, or the bank had. He panicked and started calling his high society friends. Buddy, I have a problem. Can you lend me some cash? The calls were cut off. Soon after, his calls went straight to voicemail. He didn't know it, but Darren didn't have to lift a finger. It was enough for Derek to leak Veronica's audit report to a few key people. The news that she was a fraudster and that Chad, the lover, was attached to a bankrupt and corrupt woman spread through every elite group chat. He became toxic. No one wanted to be associated with him. That same night, the video of his fight with Veronica in front of the building went viral on gossip blogs. His perfect face became linked to bankruptcy and cheap drama. His modeling career was over. The doors to the world of luxury closed. Chad, who had believed he was at the top, ended up selling his clothing and some fake accessories that he discovered Veronica had slipped him one by one to survive, returning to the anonymity he hated so much. Exactly at 10 a.m., 24 hours later, the penthouse doorbell rang. Veronica, who hadn't slept, rushed to open it, expecting to see Darren arriving to forgive her and cancel his threat. Instead, standing at the door was Derek, serene as always. Behind him were two impeccably dressed attorneys and a man in an official uniform carrying a thick folder, a court martial. "Your time is up, Mrs. Sterling," Derek said without inflection. "I need more time," she stammered. "Time is a luxury you didn't give Darren," Derek interrupted her. He took a step forward. "In accordance with the order of the Superior Court of Manhattan, we are here to execute the lien on this property." The marshal began pasting seizure seals on the entrance walls. "No, this is my house," Veronica shrieked. "Technically, it is the collateral for your debt to my client," one of the attorneys corrected. "You and this young man," he looked at Chad with evident contempt, "who has come to collect his last things, must vacate in 1 hour. Take only your essential personal effects." 1 hour later, the Sterling Tower lobby offered a reverse spectacle of the one from weeks ago. Veronica, the same woman who 10 years earlier had felt like the queen of the building, was being escorted to the street by the guards who had previously dragged Darren out. Chad followed, crying hysterically with 2 suitcases full of clothes and accessories. Veronica was no longer just bankrupt on paper. She was literally on the street, returned to the same ground zero she had tried to reduce Darren to. 2 weeks after the execution, Darren and Derek sat in the mansion's boardroom. The mahogany table was now covered with blueprints. "All the assets of Sterling Development, LLC, have been liquidated," Derek reported. "Her offices, her machinery, the penthouse, everything is enough to cover the $500,000 debt plus interest and legal fees." "Good," Darren said. "What do we do with the penthouse? Should we sell it?" Derek shook his head. "No. Sell all the luxury furniture, leave it empty. Then hand the keys over to Mr. Sterling at the First Heritage Bank of the South. Tell them to give it to Ethan as a bonus." Derek raised an eyebrow, amused by the touch of ironic justice. "Ethan? The teller?" "Yes. He deserves it. He was the first person to help me." "Very well, sir. And the 2,000 acres? Do we proceed with the luxury development plan?" Darren stood up, walking toward the window that overlooked the garden. He remembered his father's letter. "Build your own kingdom." Veronica wanted to build a palace for the rich that people like me could only look at from the gate, he said. "I'm going to do the opposite." He returned to the table and pointed to new plans. "We're going to use the first 250 acres to build decent, subsidized housing, including a school and a small medical center." "For whom?" Derek asked, now genuinely interested. "For the workers on our pecan groves and for the owners of the small suppliers Veronica nearly destroyed. They'll get priority and special discounts. And the machinery we confiscated from Veronica? We'll use it to build those houses," he added with a slight smile. "It's poetic justice." "Not only that," Darren continued. "On another 25 acres, we're going to build the Coleman Center, a training center for modern agribusiness and small business management. I want people like my father to have the chance to succeed without having to hide." Darren wasn't just getting revenge. He was creating a legacy. He was done with Veronica. But the law was not. Veronica, who was now barely living in a shared apartment on the outskirts, believed the worst was over. She thought that after losing everything to Darren, she was at least free. One afternoon, while eating instant noodles, there was a knock at the door. "Police," she heard. She jumped. "Mrs. Sterling, you are under arrest," one of the agents said. "What is this now?" "My debt to Darren is paid." "This isn't about debts," the officer replied. "It's for the use of substandard materials on the bridge in that rural Georgia town, and for tax fraud." Veronica froze. How did they know? She didn't know that Derek, on behalf of a client concerned about public safety, as Darren presented himself to the authorities, had anonymously sent copies of the double accounting and lab analyses of the faulty cement to the district attorney's office and the IRS. "She built a bridge that could fall down," Darren had said. "It could kill people. This stops being about her and me. It's a matter of justice." The news of Veronica's arrest became a local headline. Elite developer falls. Alleged corruption and fraud. In his mansion, Darren saw the news on the giant screen in the living room. He looked at Veronica's drawn and enraged face being escorted by agents. He felt neither joy nor anger, only closure. He turned off the television. 1 year later, Coleman Legacy, LLC, was no longer a dormant, mysterious company. It had become one of the new economic pillars of the region. Darren had modernized the pecan groves with sustainable practices, raised wages, and built decent facilities. The Coleman Center had opened its doors, and its first generation had already graduated. The first phase of subsidized housing was fully occupied. No one called him Mr. CEO out of fear anymore. The older workers called him Mr. Darren, or Albert's son, with respect and affection. He stood on a hill on the estate, looking out at the green expanse under the afternoon sun. He was no longer the disheveled man from the Sterling Tower lobby, nor the icy executive from the boardroom. He was the complete Darren. He heard footsteps behind him. "Darren, the view is beautiful," Derek said. He was no longer wearing a suit, just a linen shirt. He was spending more time in the country than in the city. "Yeah," Darren replied, smiling genuinely. "My father called this an anchor. Turns out you could build a lot of things with the anchor. Have you built your kingdom, Darren?" Derek asked. "We built it," he corrected him. Derek smiled. "My team back in the city keeps asking when I'm coming back. Looks like I have to give them an answer." "And what's your answer?" Darren asked, looking at him. Derek didn't answer with words. He took a step toward him, held his gaze, and offered his hand. "They don't need me as the cleaner consultant anymore." "No," Darren replied, taking his hand with a firm shake. "Now, I need you as a partner." They stood there, watching the sunset over their kingdom. A kingdom that hadn't been built on greed or lies, but on the rubble of betrayal and the foundations of justice and a new legacy. Did you like the story? What city are you listening from? I'll read your comments. If you liked it, you can show your support by sending a thank you, so I can keep bringing you more stories like this. 1,000 thanks for your kindness. I'm looking forward to reading what you thought of the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories I highly recommend. There's a lot more on the channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With all my love and respect.